What's up everyone, this is Dave LeClaire with MakeUseOf.com, and today we're here to take a look at the Blackview S8 smartphone. We're looking at a nice little Android phone that goes for about 160 bucks on GearBest, which is quite cheap when you consider that there's phones out there going for like $1,000, not to name any names. So 160 bucks, obviously you're not getting a top of the line phone here, but you are getting a pretty solid phone for the price with specs that rival that of a phone from 3 years or so ago, but that same phone 3 years ago would have cost quite a bit more than $150. So today we are going to break down the specs, we're going to look at the performance, we're going to look at everything about this phone, and we are going to decide, is this worth spending your money on? Keep watching to the end of the review and you will find out. Alright, so the first thing we're going to look at here is we're going to talk about the actual numbers of the phone. We're going to look at the specs and see just how does it stack up out there compared to some of the other phones on the market from a raw numbers perspective. So first things first, you can get the phone in black, blue, and gold. It is 6.06 inches by 2.83 inches by 0.33 inches thick, so it's quite small. For the size of the phone, I should say. It's quite small for a phone with such a large screen. Speaking of the large screen, it's 5.7 inches and it's 1440 by 720, which is an 18 by 9 aspect ratio. It weighs in at a whopping 191 grams, which again is quite light for the size of the phone. It features a 1.5 gigahertz octa-core processor, which is not you're not going to compare to your top of the line phones on the market right now, but it will compare to most of your entry level phones out there, and it is cheaper than those, so it is a pretty solid processor. It has 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of internal storage, which is pretty solid and is expandable via the micro SD card slot. Has 2 rear cameras, 13 megapixels and 0.3 megapixels, and 2 front cameras, 8 megapixels and 0.3 megapixels. Now the 0.3 megapixel camera is basically what lets it give it the depth effect. It's not obviously going to be taking your actual photos. That's going to be through the sensor, the main sensor. Comes with a 3180 mAh battery, which is enough to basically get you through the day. In our testing, we found that the battery made it about 7 hours and 30 minutes while continuously watching a YouTube video at half volume. It comes with Android 7.0 installed, though there is plans to add Android 8.1. They did say by the end of the year. We are almost at the end of the year and it's not quite out yet, but they have not said it's not coming. So as far as we know, there is still plans to add Android 8.1 to the phone and get it up to the latest version. So that's your by the numbers look at the Blackview S8. As you can see, the specs are solid. They're not going to blow you away. It's not going to beat the Pixel 2 or anything like that. But for a $160 phone, the specs are pretty good, and we're going to get into the actual performance of the phone in a bit, but we can definitely say that it runs well and it is definitely worth looking at. Alright, so now it's time to dig in and talk about the actual performance of the Blackview S8. How does it fare in a day-to-day usage as your phone? Will you be happy walking around with this thing in your pocket knowing that you're going to play games and text and all that stuff on it? The answer is, surprisingly, it's not too bad for a phone at this price point. It actually handles everything fairly well. Now in the benchmarks, it scores about the same as, say, a 3 or 4-year-old Samsung Galaxy phone, so like the S5. But it does have more RAM than those phones. It comes with 4 gigs compared to 2 gigs. So it does run a little bit faster than the older phones. And even still, if you look at the price of that phone when it came out, it still cost more than this. So there's that to consider. Obviously, technology has improved, and what was a processor from that many years ago is a little bit better than a processor now. Now in our testing, just running around using it as a phone, the only issue we found was when you're playing like 3D games, they did tend to chug a little bit in the frame rate, so that, could be better, but that's to be expected for a phone with this processor in it. It's not a top-of-the-line processor. It's not going to run top-of-the-line games as smoothly as you may like. However, otherwise, I really didn't have anything to complain about. The camera's a little slow, which is pretty common on cheaper phones, as the camera tends to push that processor to the limit. So it does take a couple seconds for the camera to open, and once it's open, looking through the viewfinder, you'll see that the image is moving a little choppy. Now, once you take the photo, it comes out relatively clear. The cameras are decent. It's not the best camera you'll ever get your hands on, but it'll do the job for most photo-taking applications. But it does run a little choppy, so that is something that you'll notice when you're using the phone. But that being said, all in all, I gotta say I was quite impressed with the performance of this phone. Now, I would not replace my current phone with this, But if my current phone broke and I needed to pick up a cheap phone to get me through, you know, a few months until I was eligible to grab a new one, I would feel perfectly fine sticking my SIM card in this one and using it as my daily phone. Now, I personally can't do that because I have AT&T, and the only network supported is one 2G band, and I don't get that 2G band here. Most towers aren't broadcasting any 2G bands anymore. So if you have AT&T, this is probably not the phone for you. There is a detailed chart on GearBest that will break down everything as far as what bands works with, what doesn't work with. If you have Verizon, you'll have better luck, but if you have AT&T or some other GSM phones, you're probably going to be SOL as far as getting service goes on this. So that is one major drawback. But if you don't have AT&T and you have another carrier and you're looking for a cheap phone, you could certainly do worse from the performance point of view. And so now we come to the big question: should you buy the Blackview S8? If you're in the market for a cheap Android phone, I will say you could certainly do worse than the S8. It runs quite well, all things considered. The camera is decent. Basically, the best way to describe this phone is it is decent. It is right down the middle. Everything it's supposed to do, it does well enough. Nothing is going to blow you away, except for the price tag, which will blow you away, and that is where it becomes a worthwhile pickup. It's not going to replace a high-end phone, so if you're thinking, oh, I've had my high-end phone for 2 years, I'm ready to go get a new one, I'm going to go buy this $160 phone and it will replace my $800 phone, it won't. But if you don't need an $800 phone and you just need a phone for making calls, texts, running some basic apps, taking some photos, this will most certainly do the job, especially at this price. Once again, this is Dave LeClaire with MakeUseOf.com. Thank you very much for watching this review. Thank you to GearBest for sending us the phones, and we will see you guys later.